Hello, this is Mihai and this is a PROCESIO tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to cover most of the things in PROCESIO, from creating an account to building a workspace, defining it, creating processes, forms and tasks, building documents, and we're going to do all that by actually building a use case in real time. But before we dive in, please make sure that you subscribe to our channel, as this will help us a lot, and also hit the notification button so that you get notified every time we release a new video, and make sure you like this video and share it with your friends and colleagues. Now let's dive in. PROCESIO, as we like to say it, it's your new company's superpower. PROCESIO, it's an automation environment that allows you to leverage data processing, systems integration, intelligent automation, and all that on top of an auto-managed infrastructure. So you don't have to mind the underlying infrastructure of the automation that you're building. So PROCESIO takes care of that, automatically scaling the processes and the underlying infrastructure as your business and requirements grows. And obviously, the bonus is that it's really fast to build on top of PROCESIO, allowing you to implement in weeks projects that otherwise could have lasted for months. In order for you to understand PROCESIO and how to use it, we have designed it to be like a visual software development environment, allowing you to create like you would create software in a software environment, but we try to make it as visual as possible. Obviously, because it's a visual software development environment, you can create stuff visually, but also you can write code using JavaScript, Python, Node.js, and C#. Once you build processes in PROCESIO, you save them and you can immediately run them. You can collaborate with your colleagues, but what we call workspaces, so you can have multiple workspaces that you can share with your colleagues in order to build projects for yourself and for your clients. And because it's built natively in the cloud, it automatically scales as the load increases on your automation and on your processes. And the three key pillars that make PROCESIO are the process designer that we're going to cover today, the forms and task designer that again we're going to cover, and the document designer. We're going to start by creating an account. Then after we created the account, we're going to talk about the workspaces and what's the difference between a personal and a business workspace. And then we're going to deep dive a bit within the workspaces. What's that, the master workspace or sub workspace? How do you create, edit, or delete those workspaces? How do you invite your colleagues to workspaces? And how you define permissions for the users that belong to a particular workspace. After that, we're going to go to the process designer. We're going to go to forms and task designer and the document designer. And we're going to do all that, but by actually implementing use case. The use case that I've chosen for today is text-to-speech summary, and I've chosen this use case because it combines most of the PROCESIO's components so that you can get a high-level understanding of what's their purpose and how to use them. So we're going to use the forms and tasks designer in order to create a visual interface where you can upload the audio file. Then by uploading that, you're going to trigger a process and display the results of that process within the same form. And for the process, we're going to use the process designer that is going to take the audio file and send it to GPT to create a speech to text. We're going to get the text out of that audio file, and then we're going to use again GPT in order to create a summary of that audio file, of that transcription. And then the summary and the transcription we're going to send to a document designer so that we create a PDF of that summary. Now, as we have laid the foundations of what we're going to cover today, let's get to it. In order to start, go to PROCESIO.com, and on the right hand side you will have sign in and start for free. If you already have an account, go for sign in. Otherwise, if you want to create a new personal community account, then go to start for free. You have 3 options to choose from. The first one is login with Google, with Microsoft Azure, or the third option, write your first name, last name, and email address. That's all you need. Let's choose Google. I will select one of my email addresses and I will create an account. If I already have an account, it's going to use that account to sign in with. Once the account has been created, on the left-hand side, you have here a selector that will allow you to jump from your personal account to the other workspaces that you are part of. You can create a new workspace by buying extra resources or by being invited to a workspace that's already existing that was created by other users. If you are already one of our partners, most likely you already have or you are already part of a business workspace that allows you to create sub-workspaces within that master workspace. So this is my personal account. As you can see, you will have 1 hour of monthly processing time that's recurring. You will always get this 1 hour of monthly processing time. It will replenish itself every month on the first of each month. And this gives you tremendous processing power. Imagine the average processing time for one action is less than 100 milliseconds. That means that 1 hour of monthly processing time gives you more than 36,000 actions processed per month, which is huge. Trust me, it's huge. And that's for free, and that's for the free account. Okay, now I'm going to log out and I'm going to log in with my other account, so that I have access to the other workspaces that I want to present and that are part of my user. Again, I've logged in. You see I'm logged in my personal account. Make sure to check where you are currently located. I am part of multiple workspaces, and now I'm going to show you how that looks like. Cool. So you can see here, if I have go to admin page, it means that I'm either owner or co-owner of this particular workspace. As it is here, I'm the co-owner of this workspace. This is the master workspace. Every master workspace can have one or multiple sub-workspaces, and you can create those workspaces, and every time you create one new workspace, you also have the option to define the default permissions of the users that are going to become part of that particular workspace. And you can choose for every aspect of that workspace what are the permissions. Those are the default permissions to choose from. And once you select or update this permission, like in this case, for example, every user that will be added from this moment on, after I hit create, will have those permissions. And you can change each individual user's permission after the fact. So you can also change it after that if it is required. As you can see here, this is how I edit an existing workspace. This is how I create a new workspace. I just need to give it a name here. And how about deleting the existing workspace, the sub workspace? As you can see here, I do not have this option, and the reason for which I do not have this option is because I'm not the owner of this particular workspace. In order to actually see how that looks like, I'm going to go to another master workspace where I am the owner of. And let's see the sub workspaces. And now, as you can see here, I have the option of deleting the workspace. Obviously, in order to delete it, I'm required to actually type the name of the workspace that I want to delete to make sure that this is actually my intention to delete that workspace, because once you delete the workspace, you cannot undelete it. All the resources from that workspace are going to be lost forever and cannot be recuperated. So make sure you use this functionality wisely and carefully. Okay, so once we have seen how the workspaces are structured, how you can invite users to a new workspace, how users are part of a particular workspace, how you can create new workspaces, edit them, delete them, or navigate to that workspace, now it's time for us to actually understand the differences between the business workspaces and the personal workspace. There are a few differences, and I'm going to go through each of those differences for you to understand what you can do in each of the types of workspaces. So, first of all, personal workspace. If you noticed, I do not have the users option anymore. So in my personal workspace, I cannot invite additional users. It's where as a user, I can build, I can test, I can do whatever I want with the resources that are perpetually allocated and replenished every month within my account. I can do whatever I want with those resources, are mine. But you cannot have new users added to this workspace. Another important aspect is that you can only export from the personal workspace. You cannot import. It's a technical limitation that we had, otherwise we would have allowed the import here as well. One other limitation is that you cannot add additional resources to the personal workspace. Even though you have the buy option allows you to either create a new business workspace or to add the resources to an existing workspace where you are already a member of. So you cannot have additional resources within the personal workspace. So those are the differences. And another difference would be that you cannot have sub workspaces within your personal workspace. Whereas in the business workspace, you have all the things that I mentioned that you do not have for the personal workspace, you have it in the business workspace. You have users. You can invite those users. You can change the permissions of those users individually. You can promote those users, make admin, make co-owner, if I have this permission. Otherwise, I will not be able to promote a user. Excellent. Now that we have covered how to create the account, how to join a business workspace, what's the difference between a personal workspace and a business workspace, now we're going to start to build the use case that by building it, we're going to also see how to use PROCESIO. We're going to go through the 3 pillars of PROCESIO, which are forms and tasks, the process designer, and the document designer. And the use case that we're going to build together in order to see all the functionalities of PROCESIO is a use case we call text-to-speech summary. So basically what we're going to do is have an audio file that the user uploads to a PROCESIO form, and processes are going to run to send that audio file to ChatGPT, have a speech-to-text extraction. So basically we're going to extract the transcript of the audio file, and then the transcript we're going to send to ChatGPT to have a summary of that. The summary we're going to use to generate a document and then present everything within the form. So we're going to use the forms and tasks, the process designer, and the document designer. Now let's navigate to a workspace where I can start building the process. It's a workspace that doesn't contain anything, so I can start from scratch. The first thing that I'm going to do is navigate to Forms Designer and hit Create Form, and we're going to start from scratch by building the form that we want. Let's first name our form. We're going to call it Speech to Text, and then we're going to configure the heading of this form. We're going to call it Speech to Text, PROCESIO, and Large Language Models. Now we need to upload a file, so we will drag and drop a file upload control. After that, we want to allow the user to choose what to do. He will have to choose either to summarize or to execute the prompt directly after the transcription has been made. Then we're going to have a text area where, in case the user wants to configure the summarization prompt, to have the option to configure it here. And then we're going to add a button that's going to submit the file and the configuration, the options that the user chose will send to a process. And then the result of that process is going to be the transcription. So basically we will need to add the transcription and transcription control. So basically we will add that in a paragraph. Then we will need to add the summary. We will write here, transcription will be generated here. Then we will need to add the, so this will be, summary will be filled here. And then in case the user's option is to execute the transcription as a prompt, then we will need a place to actually show that. And this is audio transcript prompt result title, and then the actual paragraph that will contain the result of the prompt in case the option of the user was that one. Another thing that we will need to do is after the button, in case the process executes with error, we will use this as an error area, and we're going to say error and configure both the name and the ID as an error. We're going to delete everything. So in case something is returned as error, the user will see the error directly here. One thing that we should also do is name those controls in such a way that when we will need to map them to actually know what they are about, and also make them visible false, because we want them to be displayed only in the scenario in which the process returns the summary data or the transcription prompt result, depending on the option that the user has chosen. Let's continue. Make it visible again, not visible, and we're going to choose some names that are relevant for us to recognize them. And this button, we're going to call it send to GPT. It's visible, and also let's give it a label so that the user knows what this button is about. This will be the summarization prompt, as we've said. Let's add a placeholder as well. Let's add 20 rows, so we make it bigger, and also let's add a default value. Let's add a default value, and also let's name it in such a way that's relevant for us. On the radio button, we will need to add the available options, but before that, let's set the name. The radio button label will be what do we want to do, and the options that the user has, we're going to set the data source, and we can choose static list, JSON, or URL. We're going to choose static list, and we're going to add the option summarize and the option execute audio prompt with the value. It's very important to have a value so that we will build our logic depending on the value and not depending on the label. So the label will be the element that's displayed for the user, so he knows what to choose. And also we're going to choose the default value, which will be the first element, so that we have a pre-filled element. Then we're going to go back to the file upload control. We're going to set the name in such a way that the user knows which are the accepted file extensions to upload. Let's One more thing, there's a submit button that's always there when you create a new form within PROCESIO. So we don't want to use this because we want to use our button that's not going to do a submit, but is going to run a process. And our default submit button, we should make it visible, and on the action section, we uncheck submit. So we make sure that everything is fine. We can save the form. You see that the form currently it's in draft mode. We can preview it if we want to see how this runs. We validate that everything is fine. It looks as the way we wanted it to look. And after we are ready, we can publish it so it can be used by other users, or if we want, you can make it public. Good. So one more thing before we move to actually building the process that's going to do the processing of the file, extract the text, the transcription from the audio file, and then summarize it, is I want to show you that when the user clicks on the send to GPT button, you have here options to set the event on click, and you can add trigger a process and choose the process that you want to execute. Because we do not have a process, we will build that process as well. So again, save the form and let's move on to creating the process. Let's go to Process Designer, create a process. A few things about the Process Designer. The first thing is that, as you can see here, you have a canvas on which you can drag and drop predefined actions that we call platform actions. The platform actions that you can choose from are more than 200 predefined platform actions that you can use within your processes. Just drag and drop the action on the canvas, configure that action, and I will show you how to do it in the scenario of this process, and then you're ready to go. Save the process and run. As I mentioned, we have more than 200 predefined platform actions to choose from. From those platform actions, you can also use scripting actions like Node.js, Python, JavaScript. And if there's the situation in which you do not find the predefined action that you need, you can create your own custom actions directly within PROCESIO, and you have a full tutorial about it, how to build it step by step. So you can build it, upload the Nugget package, say the name of the action and save it. Then you can use it throughout your workspace in any process that you want. But we're not going to need that. So let's get back to building the process. We go to Platform Actions and we start building the process. In order to do so, we're going to use the Call API action to connect to the OpenAI API and send the file that way. We will need to also create a credential for this Call API, and to do so, we're going to click Create Credential. We're going to name this ChatGPT of credential type REST API, and now we need to configure this. In order to see what's the required configuration, we will navigate to platform.openai.com/API-reference/introduction. We will find here all the required information. We see that we need the authorization with the bearer token, which will be the API key, an OpenAI organization with an org ID, and optionally we have the OpenAI project ID, which we are not going to use at this stage, and we need the base URL. We're going to take this base URL, paste it here, select API key authentication, then we're going to use authorization for the key. We're going to use bearer. Keep in mind that you have a space after the bearer, and then we will need to create the API key. In order to create the API key, just go here to OpenAI keys, create a new secret key. I'm going to name this and create secret key. As we have the secret key, we copy it, and then we need to test the credential to make sure that everything runs smoothly. So we're going to type here v1/models. Keep in mind this is not part of the credential, it's only for testing the credential that it works as expected. And as we can see, it works, so we save it, and now we are able to use this credential in the Call API. The next thing, we need to configure this call API so that we can send the file. We're going to choose post. We're going to use the method audio transcription. And on the header, we will need to configure the OpenAI organization, which is basically the one here. And we need the org ID, which is, in my case, is this one. And I'm going to paste it directly here. On the body of the call API, we will need to be able to send the file. So for that reason, we're going to choose form data. We're going to select the model as the Whisperer 1. Is the model that knows how to translate an audio file into transcription. And then we will need to send the file, and we will write file here, choose file, and here we're going to add the file that's going to also be on the input of the process. So we name it audio file, and we set it as input. What remains to be configured is the response status and the response body. On the response body, it's where we will receive the transcription. So let's set the status. We need to create a variable. As you can see, I'm searching for the variable, and if it is not found, I can create it, and it automatically takes the name that I've written, and I can create it like really easily like this. Now I'm also in need of a GPT output variable, which I will set as JSON, because I know the output is going to be a JSON. I'm going to create the variable. And now what remains is for me to test the action. I'm going to choose one file that I know I had on my download folder, and I'm going to test this action to see if it works. If it succeeds, then I should receive a reply with the transcription. And sure enough, I have the transcription. To enlarge this, I just need to click here and click escape so I can see better the output. Now I see I have an output with an attribute called text, so I will need to extract this information on my next step in the process. But before that, let's see what happens if I submit a file that is not the right form. So I will send a PDF, for example. I'm expecting that this PDF doesn't contain any audio information, so I will get a 400 and an error message with the message in it. So this will be a message that I want to display on the form in this field. So I will need to keep this information in order to send it to the form. So I know that I need to extract the information, but before that, let's set the name of this action. Let's call it call API GPT transcribes. I also know what this action is about. And for the next step, let's extract the text information, the transcription, from the output of the call API action. To do so, the input is going to be the GPT output. Then I'm going to extract the text attribute, and here I'm going to use the JSON path expression. Feel free to learn more by clicking here, and you will find this more about the JSON path expression and how to use it and how to configure this. And then I'm going to need to store the information that I extract within the transcription text. I do not have this variable, so I can create it, and I'm going to set it as string, and I'm going to set it as output also, because I need the content of this variable to be displayed in this field on the form. So I need to set it as output so I can parse it to the form. Now, the next thing that I need to do is take a decision if the output was successful, if I get a text or I get an error. So for that reason, I'm going to use the decisional action to take a decision. And if it is successful, then I'm going to do one set of actions. If it is not successful, then I'm going to report the error on the output of the process as an error. One aspect that we should keep in mind is that after I get the transcription, this transcription could be really large. It might be larger than the input allowed for ChatGPT. So for that reason, I'm going to need to trim the output to make sure that the number of characters in the transcription doesn't exceed a certain amount of characters, then the ChatGPT will error when I send data to it. Now, for that reason, I'm going to use take from left action. I'm going to search it from here, take from left action. And I'm going to connect the decisional on the take from left. So this is in case the decisional condition is validated. I haven't set yet the condition in the decisional, but I'm going to do that. And on the take from left, I'm going to take the transcription text and set a limit of 250,000 characters because I'm planning on using the ChatGPT 4, which has a larger context window. And I'm going to store the result in another variable called transcription text limit, which I'm going to also create. And on the case, first of all, I will change the name of the condition to OK. So if it is OK, and the condition is that transcription text is not empty. So if the transcription text is not empty, it means that I can move to take from left. And that also means that the extract object action has been successful. And in case it hasn't been successful, the next thing that I should do is to map the error, map the GPT out, which contains the error, to an error variable. And to do so, I'm going to use the map data action. And is going to go to this action on the default of this decisional. So basically, if the conditions have been met on the decisional, it's going to route those conditions to the cases that I've configured. In this case, I only have one case, right, as you can see here, but you can have multiple cases just for showing the cases. You can do it like that. And now you have multiple cases, but I'm going to delete this case. I don't need this. And on the default, so if this condition is not valid, it's going to go to default. If none of the conditions that I create on the decisional are valid, then it's going to go on the default port. And after that, I'm going to stop the process. And on the default port, on the map data, I'm going to map the GPT out to the error. And I'm going to create a new variable that I'm going to set a string and on the output, so I can put it here in the form if it is an error. And I'm going to enlarge this to make it bigger so I can work easily. And I'm going to write this. Hit Control plus I or Command plus I if you're on Mac in order to show the variable selector. Now I'm going to choose GPT out, and what I've done here is paste the GPT out JSON within a span tag, which I configured to be with color red. So in order to make this stand out to the user on the form. You will see the result of this in a minute after I finish this process. So this is on the default branch. Now let's continue on the happy path. So we're taking from left, we have the transcription text limit, and now we need to decide what's going to happen next. And we have multiple options here. As you remember, we have the option for the user to summarize or to execute the transcript as prompt, and the potential values that we're going to get is summarize and execute prompt. We will need to have this information on a variable and submit it on the input of the process. So for that reason, we need to take a decision based on that. So let's see, the next thing we will do is add a decisional node, and the potential branches are to summarize we're going to use a call subprocess. You will see in a moment. We call this GPT in case the prompt was to summarize this. The other option is the transcription to be executed as a prompt. So again, we're going to use the call subprocess in order to call a process. We are going to name this GPT execute prompt. And if I change the form and add other options, I will also need to configure the default for the decisional. So if it is not case 1, it is not case 2, then it will need to go on a default. And on the default, I will map an error so I can display something to the user on the form so he knows that this case was not configured. And to do that, I'm going to use the map data action, and I'm going to connect it to the default flow. And then I can map everything to a stop action. I can configure either multiple stops, or I can use a join action in order to connect everything together. Good, so let's configure those. This decisional is going to call route, and on the summarize action we're going to on the case 1 we're going to call it summarize. And in order to decide if this is the right path, we will need an input variable for this, and we call this input variable what to do, and is going to be of type string and is going to be an input. Good, so if what to do equals summarize, then it should go to GPT summarize. Then on the second case, which we will call execute prompt, that will activate in case what to do equals execute prompt. The execute prompt and the summarize values coincide with the values that I have in the radio option here in the form, because those values are going to be the ones that are going to be parsed to the process in the what to do input variable, and then based on that we're going to take a decision what to do within the flow. Now what remains to be done in the process is obviously we need to configure the processes that we're going to call for summarizing and for executing the prompt. But before that, let's finish the default branch where we said that we're going to map an error to, we need to do the error. We're going to map it, we make this big with this value. Control plus I. We're going to select the variable what to do. So basically the selected option what to do is not implemented. This will be the message that we're going to display in the error field on the form here with red. In the case that at some point I will add another option and I'm not going to implement that option in the process. So in that case, I will get an error saying that that option was not implemented. So I will know what to do next. Another thing that we will need to do, and I'm going to delete those branches, is to actually have some sort of indication to the form so that the form knows to make one section or the other visible, either the summary one or the prompt result ones, right? So we need to make those visible or invisible. So for that reason, we're going to also map using the map data action. We're going to map a new variable for each of the branch that is going to indicate what was the branch that was executed in order to hide or make visible the elements in the form. So what we're going to do here is create a new variable called summarize boolean. Okay, it's going to be of type boolean. It's going to be an output. We need to make this the default value as false. So in case it goes on the second branch, this variable would be by default false. If it goes through it, it's going to be true. And we also need to name this action in such a way that we know what is doing, and we're going to do the same for the execute prompt boolean action, which again we're going to create a new variable of type boolean with the default value of false, and it's going to go on the output, and for this branch we're mapping it as true. So in case it goes through this branch, it's going to become true, otherwise it's going to remain false. And that's what I've done with both summarize and execute prompt Boolean variables. And this process, it's about done. We're going to also name this because it needs a name. We call this speech to text, and now we're going to save this. As you can see, if I validate, I have errors for those two actions, and the reason for which I have errors for those two actions is that I haven't configured this process yet, but I have the process saved. Now what remains is for me to configure one process that knows how to talk with ChatGPT in order to either summarize or execute the prompt. Again, let's save the process and create a new process. The first thing we should do is name our process, and we're going to call it call GPT chat. Then, in order to connect to ChatGPT, we're going to use the call API action. For the credential, we're going to use the same credential that we configured earlier. And then, in order to call ChatGPT, we're going to use the v1 chat completion method with a post verb. Because generally ChatGPT takes a longer time to respond, we're going to also set the timeout here, 600 seconds. On the status, we're going to create a variable called status of type integer. And for the response body, we're going to create a GPT output JSON variable. Moving forward, we also need to configure the organization ID, which will be the same ID that we used in the previous call to ChatGPT. We also need to configure the content type, which is going to be application JSON. And on the body, we will use this format. We will need to call ChatGPT with this body where we select the model, we send it a message, and in the message we have the instruction prompt and the actual prompt coming from the user and the temperature of the model to be used. We're going to create all those variables. The temperature, we're going to set it as double, and we're going to set it as input so you can control this temperature from the outside of the process. Then we're going to create the GPT instruction prompt, which is going to be a string also on the input. Then we create the GPT prompt, which will be also an input of type string. And this should be all. Let's test our configuration. If you are an expert in mathematics, will be the instruction prompt, and the prompt will be. Let's test it. Now we see the response. It's a successful response. And we notice that our response is in the content here. So we will need to extract the content from messages and from choices in order to actually get the output from ChatGPT. One more thing that I want to change is to change the creativity temperature and set a default value for it, so I don't have to set it every time I'm going to use this process. Also, we will give a name to this call API action, and we're going to call it call GPT API. The next thing that we're going to do is extract the data, as we mentioned, from the response body of ChatGPT. And we're going to extract the data from the GPT out. The data that we want to extract will be the first element from choices, message, content. Let's see once more. So choices is an array, that's why I was choosing the first element from this array. Then I chose message and then content. and this is choices, the first element, message, content. And I'm going to store the result in a variable of type string that I'm also going to output. And this will be the output of the process. And this should be it. But I want to continue to improve this process a little bit more, because let's take a look here in the body. This body, it's a JSON body. So what happens if the instruction prompt or the GPT prompt is going to contain any characters that are going to break my JSON? What to do then? So in order to prevent the situation, I'm going to treat those scenarios in which the GPT instruction prompt and the GPT prompt might contain elements that could break my JSON body. To do that, I'm going to use a Node.js scripting action for each of the variables. The first one, I'm going to treat the prompt, and on the second one, I'm going to treat the instruction prompt. Now we're going to connect the actions, and after that we're going to configure the node prompt action, and we're going to use this script in order to replace from the variable content, replace the characters that might break the JSON body. And then we're going to output the same variable after it has the characters replaced. We're going to use the GPT prompt variable. And then on the output of the action, we're going to also put GPT prompt. So basically, the GPT prompt action is going within the node prompt action, has the characters replaced, then it's outputted to the same variable. We're going to do the same for the node instruction, the same script. We're going to replace the input variable with GPT instruction prompt, and we're going to put the same variable on the output. And this is it. We save the process. We validate it, everything is fine. And now we can move to the other process where we had the GPT summarize whole subprocess action and the GPT execute prompt action, where we need to replace the subprocess. We're going to use the call GPT chat, which is the process that we've just finished. And we're going to map the input parameters, GPT prompt and GPT instruction prompt. For the GPT instruction prompt, we're going to use the summarization prompt, which is going to be a string input. And we're going to use the default value that we also have on the form, which is this one. We're going to use this so that the user can change the summarization prompt in the user interface and send that summarization prompt to the process that's executed. And that's why we put the default value of the summarization prompt variable in here. Then we're going to set the GPT prompt, and this will be the GPT prompt that we're going to use. And then we put the variable content transcription text limit. We're using the transcription text limit, which is basically the transcription text limited to 250,000 characters, so that we make sure that the GPT will not break. This is the variable that we're taking. Now we're going to map the output of the process, which is GPT content output, to the summary, which is a string output that the process is going to output in order to map it here to the summary in the user interface. Now this action is configured. We're moving to GPT execute prompt. Again, we're going to select the same process called GPT chat, and then we're going to configure the inputs of the process, GPT instruction prompt and GPT prompt. And then we're going to configure the GPT content output of the process. For the instruction prompt, we're going to use this, your helpful assistant, ensure clarity and accuracy, and present the result as HTML as we will present it on a web page. The GPT prompt will be the transcription text limit, which is the transcription of the audio file limited to 250,000 characters. The GPT content output, we will map it to custom prompt result, which will be a string output. And it's an output because we want to map it to the visual interface here, to the custom prompt result. And now the process is ready. We can validate it, make sure that everything is fine, and then we save it. And that's it. What we need to do now is to finalize the configuration of the form in such a way that it knows how to execute the process that we've just created and map the outputs of the process to the form so it behaves in the way that we wanted it to behave. So for that reason, we're going to go to the form, click on the Send to GPT button, go to Events, on the click event, select Trigger Process, and we're going to trigger Speech to Text. And for that, we're going to map the input variables of the process to the variables from the form. So as we see now, we have 3 variables: the audio file, the summarization prompt, and the what to do. For the audio file, we're going to map it to the file upload. The summarization prompt, we're going to map it to the summarization prompt value, which is this one. And the what to do, we're going to tie it to the radio what to do value, which will be the value of the selected item by the user. For the output of this process, we're going to have to map multiple outputs of the process to different fields within the form. First of all, the summary. The summary will go to the summary label, which will be here, this one. The transcription text will go to transcription label, which will be this one. Custom prompt result will go to custom prompt result label. Error will go to error label. And then we need to also take care of displaying the fields that we want to display. So the summarize, we're going to use it, summarize boolean, we're going to use it 2 times, and we're going to display the summary heading and the summary. Summary heading, visible, and summary visible, those 2 ones. Then for 2 times we're going to use the execution prompt boolean, and we're going to tie it to the heading of the custom prompt and the custom prompt result visible properties. So custom prompt heading, this will be visible. Custom prompt result, visible, this one. And one more thing that we need to do is make sure that the transcription will be visible as well. And for that reason, we are going to temporarily save this form, go back to the process and define one more variable, which we will call it true. And we'll have a default value of true, so we get the value from the process. Now that we have updated the process, we will also need to refresh the process from here in order to actually see the variable that we've just created within the process, which is called true, and we're going to map it to transcription visible, which is this one. And now our form is ready. We can publish it, and let's open this in a new tab in order to test it. It's looking really good. Now let's select the file. Let's choose Summarize and send to ChatGPT. As you can see, we have an error. Let's investigate this error a little bit. We go to the process that was executed. We should see the instance and see what went wrong. So the only thing that we see is that we're getting an error, quota error. Let's search it on the web. Let's try to run again. After my research, apparently it shouldn't be an issue. Okay, so now it runs. Let's try again one more time. Good. So as I can see, the transcript is displayed and the summary is also displayed, but something's wrong. Okay, so there's no summary. So ChatGPT didn't reply with the summary, and that's the reason for which it is not visible. But let's see what we've sent. So the summarization prompt is this one, and the transcription is correct. So I should have got a summary, I should have got a reply from ChatGPT, but this is how large language models are. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Let's try something else right now. Let's try to execute another script as a prompt, and for that we're going to record an instruction for ChatGPT. Now the instruction will be like this. Hey ChatGPT, please tell me more about PROCESIO and what PROCESIO is about. Also, you can search the www.procesio.com website so that you can learn more about PROCESIO and give more information about what we're doing. Now let's see. I'm going to execute this audio transcript as a prompt and see what it does. Perfect. So this is the transcript and this is the prompt result of ChatGPT. So what it did is get the transcription of the audio file and then executed the transcription as a prompt to ChatGPT, and the output of that was presented here in the user interface. Let's try it again with summarize. I'm going to record a new audio file. Hey ChatGPT, this is an audio transcription text. Just curious to how this works and see if there's any result. In case you are asked to summarize this information, please give the best response as possible. Let's try it again. Good, so I see that the transcription is good, but the summary, something is wrong with it. Let's go back to the process and investigate this a bit more. So the summarization prompt is your summarization expert. Okay. And the audio transcript is this one. So it should be good. Let's see what it did. Apparently it did the right thing. Let's go to this process to call ChatGPT and see what it had done. Okay, so the prompt is this one. It is as expected. Okay, so it got an error. So this is apparently the reason for which we got this. And we see that we got a 400 status. And the reason for which the process worked is that we haven't treated this error in any way. So we assumed that we will have this information. We extracted the information that we wanted to extract. But because we got an error and the structure of the error is different than the structure when the call is successful, our content is null. So for that reason, there's nothing to display here in this example. Okay, so once more, let's see where this error might come from. Okay, so what I believe is happening is that the GPT prompt variable is breaking the body here. And the way I see it is that the new spaces are not replaced. So this is what I see here. In order to debug this, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to add also the error here to actually see if I get any error. Good. Now, in order to test under the exact same conditions, I'm going to rerun the same process with the same input variables to see what it does. Okay. Good. So apparently I have an error within my first prompt, and the reason for which I see that I have this character. For whatever reason this character has entered my prompt. I will check if this okay, so let's see how to fix this. So what happens is that within my prompt I have this character, and because I have two characters the same, my script is breaking. So the way to fix this is before the script, to make sure that I'm going to escape that character. So I'm going to search for this character and I'm going to escape it with a backslash. And I'm going to store it back to the prompt. And then I'm going to do the same for the instruction prompt, just to be safe. Also give both actions a name. Now tie both actions. Let's save it and let's retest using the exact same inputs. And voila, success. Now let's see if ChatGPT likes it right now. And yes, it does. We have a 200 status and we have the output as expected. Now everything should be correct. Let's go back to our process, to the speech-to-text process, and check something once more to make sure. So this is the audio transcript. Okay, so this is where that character came from. Somehow this slipped. I also delete it because I don't need it here. I'm going to save the process. Now let's retest it directly from the form, directly the same input file. I do not have to change anything else. And it works. So this is it. I hope you enjoyed this video. You also got a chance to see how I debug in PROCESIO. Hopefully you won't have to, but you can be sure that you can debug things. And PROCESIO, it's extremely flexible for your day-to-day job, but also for building stuff for your organization, for your company, for your department, or for your colleagues. Make sure you like this video, subscribe so that you get notified whenever we release new videos, and please give us feedback. Hey, I forgot something. Because this video took several days to film and mount, I completely forgot about the fact that we should have also done a PDF summary using the document designer. But because you had the patience to stay until the end of this long video, let's do it really fast. Now, the things that we need to do, first of all, is integrate this PDF part within the speech-to-text process. But in order to do that, we will need, first of all, to create a document designer that is going to hold the content of the variable that is returned by ChatGPT. And to do so, we're going to go to Document Designer, create a new document. We're going to call it like really simple document from GPT. We're going to define a variable. We're going to call it content. It's going to be of type string, and we're going to create it and then just place it within the document. Let's save it, and that's it. We can create much more complex documents. I'm just showcasing this situation where I ask ChatGPT to actually give me an output, an HTML output, and that output I'm going to directly place within this document. But you can have much more complex situations than this. You can create tables, you can add images, you can create dynamic images, you can create dynamic content, you can have contracts, offers, addendums, invoices, or whatever. The core differentiator here is the fact that you can also have lists of items. So, for example, you could have a document with a table. You can do everything, almost. But now let's limit to our existing use case. Let's save the document and see how to integrate this document within our existing process. Let's go to our process. And what we're going to do is move those actions a bit to the right. Let's delete those lines, and we're going to use the generate document. We're going to select the document from GPT. We're going to save it as a document. You have also the option of saving it as HTML, but we're going to choose PDF. The file name is going to be document.pdf. It doesn't really matter for this particular use case. The document output is going to be the file that I'm going to output, is going to be called file out. This will be an output variable that I'm going to send to the form, and then I need to map the internal variable of the document with the information that I want to map from the process. Right, in this case, I'm going to actually use the output here, which is the summary, and I'm going to map the summary from this process to the content, which is the internal variable of the document template that I've created. Then I'm going to do the same. I'm just copy pasting this action just to show that you can do it as well. And the only difference that we will have here is that this time I'm going to map the content of the document with the custom prompt result. From here. So this is the only change that I had to do for the process. I'm going to save the process, and now I'm going to go to the form designer, and I'm going to add another element to this form, which is the file upload, and I'm going to add it at the bottom, and I'm also going to make this visible false. I'm going to name this file result, and then on the send to GPT, I'm going to go to events on click. I'm going to refresh the process to make sure that my new variable is displayed. I'm going to search for this new variable, file document out, which is going to map to my file result value. And also I want to make this visible so that true will go to file result visible. And that should be it. Let's publish it. Let's test this. And I'm going to use an existing recording, send to ChatGPT, And let's wait to see what happens. And sure enough, we have our result. And this is the transcript that we have. And this is the document that we can now download and visualize, which has the same content, as you can notice, to the thing that I also have displayed here. And this should be it. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you have any feedback for us to improve on the next videos, please feel free to comment and to share your feedback with us. Have a great day.